Hi, and welcome to Best in Tesla. BYD's CEO just shocked the entire car industry by saying at their event to celebrate their 5th million electric car being produced that the Chinese automakers should unite and demolish the old legacy automakers in a global push. And they do this from a position of strength, as battery production in China should also be growing so fast that even the Chinese are worried about overcapacity in battery production. In only a couple of years, China should have 4 times the capacity in battery factories than what they need for their local market, and about half of the entire global battery needed to switch the transportation sector to EVs. So the perfect storm is brewing in China for the Chinese EV makers to push the Western car brands out of China, and that would be devastating for most of them. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger once said, "Control oil and you control nations." But this is quickly changing as we are shifting over to renewable and electric vehicles, so today it should probably say, "Control battery production and you control nations." And the problem is, there are not a lot of countries that are controlling battery production, as China sits on something like more than 60% of all battery production in the world. But the numbers are even higher when it comes to refining those materials that goes into the batteries. And this could be a big worry, as that means the Beijing could set the world's prices and pretty much control the energy storage of the future. But of course, this is not oil that burns once and then you have to dig up some more. Batteries are going to be recycled. So eventually, China will no longer have such a huge control over the world's battery market, as the batteries that goes into EVs and storage systems around the world and stay there, and then we can recycle them and have that materials for batteries in Europe or the US or wherever the battery is recycled. So this could make Chinese control a lot smaller over the long term, but in the short term they are pretty much in control right now. So the Chinese is in a very strong position if they should do what BYD said they should do: come together and crush the Western legacy automakers, as the top 10 EV battery makers now holds 95% of the market. So there are 10 battery manufacturers that sit on almost the entire battery market, and of those 95%, China sits on more than 60% of the entire battery market. And if you think, well, we are decades out from having enough battery factories to supply the world's car makers, well, the factories we have planned right now should actually be close enough to supply the entire car market with batteries, as we have just learned how many battery factories have been made and are projected to be done by 2025. As it is so much that even the Chinese are a bit worried about oversupply of batteries, as China, which will produce about 4,800 gigawatt hours of batteries by 2025 if all planned projects pan out, of course. This is 4 times the amount that the local manufacturer need, and may result in an EV battery glut just when the US and Europe are also battling for EV battery plants with various generous incentives. They of course still need to get all the materials for those many thousand gigawatt hours, and as Elon has said, the bottleneck is more the refining of the materials than the materials themselves. But it does not seem to be the battery factories that are missing anymore, that's for sure, as Elon showed at Battery Day. For the entire transportation sector to become electric, we would need about 10 terawatt hours of battery production, and to shift out the entire fleet we would need that production for about 15 years, so about 150 terawatt hours. But a yearly production of 10 terawatt hours. When Elon and Tesla talked about this, it seems like an almost impossible big number, but now we learn that by 2025, China on its own will have battery production capacity, anyway, for about half of that amount. And we know Tesla is aiming for about 3,000 gigawatt hours themselves, so about 3 terawatt hours. So what China has planned and what Tesla has planned alone is enough for about 80% of all the batteries needed for the transportation sector. But we also need about 10 terawatt hours for storage, so I don't think China need to worry too much about overcapacity right now, as the storage might even grow to much bigger numbers as more of the developing world get access to electricity, internet, EVs, and much, much more. But I do hope they are investing as much into recycling batteries as they are into battery factories themselves, as they will be the new mining in maybe 25 years. But anyway, this is just to say the battery factory capacity is being built as we speak, and we will not have a shortage of battery factories anyway. So the pace of EV production will all come down to how much materials we have and how fast we can refine it. And according to Elon, we are not so much in shortage of the materials as we are in the refineries. And that is why Tesla has taken on lithium refinery, as Tesla saw that as a bottleneck for how fast they could grow. So the battery slowdown and shortage we have been hearing about for many years, and Toyota have been out many times trying to scare people into believing we do not have enough batteries and therefore we need to make hybrids and not fully electric vehicles. Well, they seem to just be more lies from Toyota. So the Chinese are in a very strong position right now, as we see battery production capacity in China seems to become 4 times higher than what they need themselves in China in only a couple of years. And they are becoming a big player in the electric car market, and their cars is not rubbish as many might want you to think. Sandy Munro, the car expert of car expert, have said that the Chinese makes better EVs than the Western brands. And even the German automakers are now out saying that they are falling behind. You probably remember what Audi CEO said when Volkswagen CEO Oliver Blume took all the manager of the Volkswagen Group to the Shanghai Auto Show this year, right? As they were shocked by how far the Chinese have come in 3 to 4 years since the country has been cut off from the rest of the world. As Audi's CEO Duismann said, the German auto industry has underestimated the strengths of the Chinese competitors. We are seeing a technology battle in China, the likes of which I have never seen before. So even the Germans are looking at China with some worried faces. So the old legacy automakers are already in trouble in China. They have not kept up with the technology battle that is going on in China, leaving the legacy automakers' EVs feeling old school and outdated. And because China is so far ahead in EV adoption, we already see legacy automakers disappearing in China. Last year, Stellantis' Jeep joint venture in China filed for bankruptcy. We have also just had Mitsubishi saying they are going to leave China completely. The biggest car market in the world, they will leave, as they do not make EVs, and in China we are looking at more than 30% EV market share. So because no one of the legacy automakers are making these high numbers of EVs in their production, they are already shrinking in China. Volkswagen just lost the crown in China as the biggest automaker last year to BYD. And their EV venture is not looking good, as Volkswagen in Q1 was down 38.7% compared to Q1 of 2022. In a rapidly rising market, Volkswagen was down almost 40%. Yes, their EV sales are collapsing in China, and while Volkswagen finally lowered their prices in China on the ID.3, even though they said they would never do that, but they had to and are desperate to get some traction in China, as the Volkswagen brand is not strong enough in China when it comes to EVs for them to have a higher sticker price than the Chinese EVs. But it's not just the European automakers that is waking up. Jim Farley has also said this year about the Chinese market, the market has totally changed. As he also said, we see Tesla and the Chinese as our true competitor, not GM or Toyota. So they are all feeling it, And now we see that the Volkswagen brand and Audi have both partnered up with Chinese automakers to get help to make compelling EVs for the Chinese market, pretty much giving up, saying we cannot make EVs as good as the Chinese and therefore need their help. But this is why BYD is now out saying that the Chinese automakers should not help the old legacy automakers, as BYD is not in a joint venture with anyone, and calls on the Chinese automakers to unite and demolish the old in a global push. So the legacy automakers are already bleeding in China as they cannot keep up with the EV demand there is in China and are losing ground and even pulling out or filing for bankruptcy. And now BYD sees this as the perfect timing to strike back at the old legacy automakers in the industry and saying that they should not do partnership like Xpeng is doing with Volkswagen. If they decide to do this, this could be a devastating blow for many of the old guys, as China is not just the biggest car market on the planet, but it is their biggest market. Like Volkswagen, that have 40% of their sales being in China and 50% of their profits comes from China. What will happen to someone like Volkswagen if they suddenly lose 50% of their profits? But how about Tesla then? Well, Tesla is the only one not in a joint venture in China. Tesla owns 100% of their own factories. So I don't think we should worry too much about Tesla in this regard, as they are already doing very well in China, having the best-selling EV model in the country with the Model Y that is also the best-selling SUV overall in the country. But legacy automakers should definitely worry if the Chinese automakers come together to try to crush the legacy automakers in China and try to become a global giant and not just in China. Because the legacy automakers are beaten and bleeding. They come from a position of desperation, where BYD comes from a position of strength. So let's keep an eye on how the Chinese automakers will react to this call to unite from BYD. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.